Part 1. The 10 Assumptions. Introducing the assumptions. We are all visitors to this time, this place. We are just passing through. Our purpose here is to observe, to learn, to grow, to love. And then we return home. Australian Aborigine Proverb. The 10 assumptions offered in this book, along with the accompanying definitions, when adopted wholeheartedly, without doubt or compromise, elevate one into a higher vibratory reality, a state free of fear and anxiety. You may not find it easy to accept some or all of the propositions offered, and that's okay. You have two choices. Either make a sincere decision to accept these assumptions as absolutes, as they are presented, or adopt those that you feel good about and develop your own set of assumptions. For instance, not everyone is comfortable with the concept of reincarnation or the idea of a spirit world. Trust your own intuition and proceed accordingly. The important thing is to be sure that the assumptions that form the foundation for your life are your own beliefs, chosen by you, not unexamined ones imposed on you by others. Either way, the process will not work for long if we merely try to add the new assumptions as an overlay over the old ones. Our old, subconscious beliefs will continue to exercise enormous sabotage power over us. We have deep and sometimes difficult work to do in order to replace our deep-seated and often poisonous core beliefs with a higher understanding. As we must do periodically, when our tired old computer grows sluggish and finicky, we have to implement a major upgrade to our operating system. But, having done that successfully, everything changes. We find ourselves in a magical, abundant world, a world of grace and ease. We may or may not choose to have much in the way of money or material stuff, but everything we need is always there, right when we need it. It's not that we no longer have to work, per se. It's that our work and our play become indistinguishable, in the same way that, in the indigenous world, the secular and the spiritual are indistinguishable. Choose a job you love, and you will never have to work another day in your life, attributed to Confucius, philosopher, 551 to 479 BCE. Note: the phenomenon this book calls the conscious loving universe is emphatically not a mere mental construct, an abstract intellectual fantasy. It is a profound biological reality. In fact, it is the only reality. It is nothing less than life itself, ever-evolving, ever-unfolding life. It is not separate from us. Each of us is inextricably entangled with it. It is us. We are it. In some strange sense, the universe is a participatory universe. John Wheeler, Ph.D., quantum physicist. Physicists have speculated that entanglement extends to everything in the universe because, as far as we know, all energy and all matter emerged out of a primordial Big Bang, and thus everything came out of the chute already entangled. Some further speculate that empty space, the quantum vacuum itself, may be filled with entangled particles. Such proposals suggest that despite everyday appearances, we might be living within a holistic, deeply interconnected reality. Dean Radin, Ph.D., physicist. There is no reality except the one contained within us. That is why so many people live such an unreal life. They take images outside them for reality and never allow the world within to assert itself. Hermann Hesse, novelist. What you see is what you get. As quantum science teaches us, we create what we put our attention on. The phenomenon is called the observer effect and is the subject of the Einstein's mouse conundrum. A little recognized consequence of the phenomenon is that when we spend our evenings agonizing over the latest tragedies on TV or watching YouTube rants about the Great Conspiracy, Goldman Sachs, the Trilateral Commission, and the dreaded Illuminati, we align ourselves vibrationally and participate in the same frequency with the fear-based consensus reality, an insidious collective mental construct that holds enormous hypnotic power over our entire society. Furthermore, by our participation, we help to co-create, perpetuate, and consolidate the status quo, even if we think we are doing the opposite. Many liberal Americans, for instance, listen religiously to National Public Radio in the belief that it is important to stay informed. By doing so, we unknowingly reinforce the consensus reality. We become unconscious collaborators in a scenario that none of us would intentionally design, were it up to us, but we go along with the herd, unaware that there is any alternative. So compelling is this quote-unquote reality that we can barely conceive of anything else. It's a figure-ground situation, like the famous painting of the young girl and the old woman. When your conscious awareness is focused on the old crone, it's impossible to see the young girl, and vice versa. Unconsciously, without knowing it, we empower everything we place our attention on, whether for better or for worse. What can we do about this relatively unknown but vitally important power of the human mind? It's a little like this. You and your sweetheart are sitting in the theater. The orchestra strikes up, the audience erupts into applause, the cast bursts out onto the stage, and the show begins. The problem is, you can't see a thing. There is a wonderful replica of a hand-carved Etruscan column 6 inches in front of your face, and all you can think about is why you spent $100 for the worst seat in the house. What can you do? You shuffle in your seat, move your head a few inches to the left, and presto, you too can watch the show. All it took was a change in perspective, a shift of focus. You had a choice. And as a bonus, you find yourself closer to your beloved. All you had to do was to change your point of view. So it is in our daily lives. If we shut off the TV, ignore the headlines, knowing that they are nothing but illusory and depressing distractions, and focus instead on what is good in the world, on the boundless beauty and inspiration that surrounds us, we not only improve our own lives, we become a source of positive energy and inspiration for those close to us. An outdated worldview. Here is a fundamental fact. No matter what culture we belong to, our current societal paradigm, our consensus reality, is determined entirely by our collective basic assumptions about the nature of the universe. These assumptions are our community's deepest core beliefs, the unquestioned axioms upon which most of us base our lives. The problem is that these foundational assumptions are not necessarily either accurate or permanently fixed in time. This is not common knowledge. Assumptions are by definition something we take for granted. We rarely, if ever, examine or question them. And yet, these assumptions, these core beliefs, determine every thought we think, every feeling we experience, every attitude we adopt, every decision we make, and every action we take individually and collectively. We don't take a breath without assuming there's air to breathe. We don't sit down without assuming that the chair will support our weight. Our most fundamental assumptions were inherited from our predecessors, were culturally imposed on us from birth, and reflect, unless we have undertaken some powerful inner work, the outdated worldview and cosmology of our antecedents, our caregivers, our teachers, our priests, our culture heroes. Most of these assumptions were developed a long time ago to serve a very different world from the one we inhabit today. They were developed by people who lived in a great deal of fear and ignorance. Being subconscious, our collective belief system holds enormous power over us and keeps us trapped in a hypnotic trance from which it is not easy to awaken. I think we ought always to entertain our opinions with some measure of doubt. I shouldn't wish people dogmatically to believe any philosophy, not even mine. Bertrand Russell, Ph.D., philosopher. The outer forms these assumptions take vary enormously depending on where and when we live, what culture we were born into, what religion or philosophy we ascribe to, what historical period we're talking about, and so on. Consider a San Bushman hunter-gatherer in the year 10,000 BC, a Harvard law professor at the turn of the 19th century, an Islamic fundamentalist in present-day Afghanistan, a Hindu guru in Vedic times, a contemporary New York heroin addict, a 17th century Zulu warrior, a medieval farmer in Italy, and the 21st century Czechoslovakian mistress of a London stockbroker. These folks are all, undeniably, members of our species, Homo sapiens, and yet the cosmology, the worldview of each, might well be unrecognizable and incoherent to each of the others. They might as well be from different species, living on different planets in different universes, in different vibratory realities. In fact, that is a pretty good description of the situation. Furthermore, each of these disparate cultures attempts to understand and describe those realities via unique languages that have their cultural assumptions built into them at the root level. However, as we reveal in this book, we can change our entire reality simply by changing our worldview, our belief system. We are not talking about just another belief system here or a religious conversion, but about a carefully constructed and consciously chosen new set of assumptions on which to base our existence. This is something that has rarely, if ever, been attempted before, at least voluntarily. If our worldview, our cosmology, is indeed so mutable, what is to prevent us as individuals and groups from making up our own reality, from rethinking and recreating our world from the ground on up? Indeed, looking around, it is obvious that even in our own culture, at this particular moment in history, there are numerous coexisting realities. We are by no means all on the same page. The important thing to realize is that we can turn that page at will. There are plenty of precedents for exactly that. To cite a few current examples, since the 1960s, numerous children of Irish Catholic parents have chosen to become agnostic intellectuals. Many of the past few decades' converts to Eastern mysticism are from Jewish backgrounds. Intellectual American novelists have become Zen Buddhist monks, and the offspring of atheist communists have become devout, born-again Christians. We are, of course, not talking about merely adopting a pre-existing mystical, spiritual, or philosophical path, as most of the above converts have done, without examining or changing our deepest assumptions. We are talking about going way deeper, all the way down to the very foundations of our beings. By doing so, we each have the potential to become something that has never existed before. The point? Everything about our inner life is mutable, flexible. Nothing is set in stone. We have the right, the freedom, and the ability to change our minds using our innate power of discernment to shift our perception and to rethink reality based on the newest and most inspiring information available to our consciousness. This is not just an intellectual process. It also calls for the activation of and trust in our intuition, our feelings. Once we learn to resonate to our deepest inner knowing and to act from that place, we can consciously choose to change our vibratory rate, to elevate our frequency, to move into the trust frequency. Or not. It's our choice. The result? If change is what we choose, everything shifts as our inner perceptions shift and our outer world is never the same. The newspapers may, for the moment, still be reporting the latest versions of the same old stuff. But our attitude, our perspective, our worldview, our vision of reality has changed, and we experience things very differently. The inescapable fact is, we create our own reality, individually as well as collectively. The nature of that reality is up to us. As challenging as it might be to accept, we are personally responsible for everything that unfolds in our lives. Everything, without exception, even the actions of others. We each write the script for our own life's movie, whether we know it or not, and the characters in our movie are our own creations, like it or not. The movie can be a romantic comedy, a Greek tragedy, or a horror story. It can have a happy ending. Once we decide to make the shift, we have become part of the solution, and the problem is on its way out. We can rewrite our movie anytime we like. If we choose not to, the past stays present, and we remain stuck in our old ways of being. Again, it's our choice. It's entirely up to us. Not everybody realizes that each and every one of us has a worldview, and that our worldview depends entirely on our assumptions. A brilliant scientist friend exclaimed recently, "What? I have a worldview? You know, I never thought of that." This is not something we are taught in grade school or even in graduate school, but things are changing as we humans become more aware of who and what we are, as we begin to understand our relationship to the universe, and as we realize that it is entirely up to each of us to choose the reality we wish to live in. We co-create the future. That being the case, why not take the job seriously and create a reality, and by extension, a future, that is a direct outgrowth of conscious intention and intelligent choice? Rather than the future being something that just happens to us, something beyond our control, something imposed on us from the outside, what if the future, like our individual reality, is in fact something that we came to this planet to create, to co-create with our fellow humans? Nirvana in the here and now. Can we learn to relax, listen deeply, and act on our inner promptings in a state of trust, with full confidence that everything is unfolding to a perfection beyond our wildest imaginings? Can we learn to trust that our task is to allow pure love to manifest in the physical realm? Do we have any idea what that might mean? All of these questions will be discussed in the forthcoming chapters as we present and describe a coherent new paradigm which, with a little practice, will move the reader into a state of being called the trust frequency, a state that is nothing less than heaven on earth, nirvana in the here and now. The nature of the phenomenon we call the future, very simply, depends on our assumptions about it and how we act upon those assumptions. Consequently, the future we are creating depends in equal measure on our fundamental assumptions about the world, about ourselves, about our species, and about the mechanics of the universe we inhabit. The omega point is right on time. Now that Homo sapiens has had a few 100,000 years to sit around the campfire and ponder the big picture, now that self-reflection, indigenous wisdom, quantum science, technology, spirituality, and philosophy have come together to give us a picture of the universe as profoundly mutable, ever-evolving, interconnected, and conscious, now that the Internet has united our species in ways previously unimaginable, the time has at last arrived when we can take personal responsibility for our lives and the future of our planet and our species. Teilhard de Chardin's prophetic vision of an evolutionary quantum leap in human consciousness, a move to a higher vibratory frequency, which he called the omega point, is right on time, and the time is now. It begins with me. The process of upgrading the operating system of our entire species may look like a daunting, if not impossible task, but as the new science of chaos theory teaches us, in this radically connected post-Newtonian world, a very small cause can have a very large effect. I can make a difference. You can make a difference. Together we can make a difference. A book like this will make a difference. All we have to do is do it. The journey of 1,000 miles, they say, begins with a single step. It begins with me, with you, with each of us, as we wake up and rub the sleep from our eyes. A new way of seeing. The essential point, one that few of us recognize at this point in history, is that we each have the right, the freedom, and the innate ability to consciously choose and modify our own reality and to alter the underlying beliefs which define and create that reality. As we ponder each of the quote-unquote new assumptions in the forthcoming chapters, we will also look at the corresponding old assumption on which current consensus reality is based. A reality that has conditioned our minds to believe that the limited and limiting world most of us experience is the only game in town. More often than not, the new assumptions are quite literally the polar opposites of the old ones. If we have the courage to invert much of what we have been taught, to flip many of our basic unconscious beliefs 180 degrees, we find ourselves approaching a truth that aligns with the timeless wisdom of the indigenous elders, visionary scientists, mystics, shamans, poets, spiritual masters, saints, and prophets of all ages and all cultures. We begin to trust that truth and to change our behavior, and the world begins to change with us. The greater part of what my neighbors call good, I believe in my soul to be bad, and if I repent of anything, it is very likely to be my good behavior. What demon possessed me that I behaved so well? Henry David Thoreau. This wisdom, this way of seeing the world, is not new. On the contrary, it is ancient. It was brilliantly articulated by Vedic scholars, the rishis, over 5,000 years ago. It is pretty much universal among indigenous societies. It has been available since the dawn of time, but has awaited the advent of quantum science and a growing understanding of the indigenous worldview to find an articulation that the developed world can accept, assimilate, and act upon. Other than a few extraordinary way-showers, a few masters, saints, or prophets, known and unknown, no individual or society has yet lived a trust-based reality in its pure form. The frequency of fear has been the dominant energy on the planet for a very long time. That fear has influenced everyone's behavior, including those with an outwardly trust-based cosmology, such as the indigenous peoples of the world. Indigenous people, with few exceptions, have displayed fear-based behavior as out of balance as anything the so-called developed world has displayed, fantasies of the noble savage notwithstanding. The twin demons of fear and doubt have infected our entire species for so long we can scarcely imagine a trust-based world. However, all is not lost. Far from it. Homo sapiens stands at the brink of a true quantum shift, an evolutionary leap, which will elevate our species from the long-established fear-based paradigm into a love and trust-based reality. Our hearts are opening one by one. The earth herself is evolving toward a higher frequency. Open your heart to others. When you do so, you will feel our spirit. It will make you dance, and it will make you happy, and then you too will be a Bushman. From Kalahari Bushman Healers, edited by Bradford Keeney, Ph.D. The Lizard Brain. Ask yourself a few questions you have probably never been asked before. What are your 10 most basic core beliefs about the nature of reality? Can you name them? If so, would you write them down for future reference? They'll come in handy later as you embark on your process of inner change. Now, ask yourself this. When did you first adopt these beliefs, these assumptions, these ideas that define the way you live your life, the way your life feels to you? Where did they come from? Would you agree that most of your deepest held beliefs about the world, about the nature of reality, were already firmly in place by the time you were 3 or 5 or 7 years old? Would you agree that you did not consciously analyze or choose any of these ideas, attitudes, opinions, and concepts before integrating them into your worldview and burying them deep in your unconscious? Do you have any idea who developed these beliefs, what their concept of reality was, and where their ideas originally came from? How could you have? You were a little child. We think you see the situation. Our collective consensus reality was crafted, consciously or otherwise, and locked into place many generations ago by people who lived in a great deal of fear and ignorance, and who lacked much of the information that we take for granted today. It is not hard to see that the worldview upon which the world currently operates is seriously out of date, if not just plain wrong. Much of it seems to have originated in the ancient reptilian fight-or-flight brain, the so-called lizard brain, and it no longer serves us. On the contrary, it is dangerous in the extreme. There are powerful forces in place, of course, to keep things just the way they are, including the fundamentalist religions and the totalitarian political systems of the world, as well as multinational corporate interests and the corporate-owned news media. On a more subtle level, even the most liberal traditions and social systems, based as they inevitably are upon erroneous assumptions, serve to keep humanity trapped in an outdated web of illusory misbelief. It's nobody's fault, it's just the way it is. The only way out is up. It is going to take a profound shift on the part of intelligent and open-minded individuals, people such as ourselves, to make a deep commitment to ourselves and our communities and to help trigger the change and the growth called for in this book. There is going to be resistance, both inner and outer. Old habits die hard. On the other hand, the new assumptions presented in this book make so much sense, and they are so much more attractive than most of our existing beliefs, that adopting them is an act of pleasure, a thrilling liberation from bondage. What a relief it is to wake up into a conscious, loving, abundant, interconnected universe and let go of the cold, dead mechanical illusion brought to us by Newton, Descartes, and Darwin, those great but limited genii of the past who based their realities on the same fear-based assumptions as everyone else. They thought that reason alone would save us. Please be assured that not everyone suffers from a completely negative, fear-based worldview. That is not what we are suggesting. Most of us are not cowering under the bedsheets, afraid to face the world. Each of us is a mix of the positive and the negative, a balance of trust and fear. In fact, it is remarkable how much trust each of us does manifest in our daily lives. How otherwise would any of us get up and face the challenge of each new day? Humans are innately trusting beings, or we would not have survived this long, but we have put our trust in the wrong place. For the past 4 centuries, we have trusted our left brain, reason-based view of the world and ignored everything else. That was the logical thing to do. Given our unbalanced history and the current state of affairs, it is astounding how much we continue to trust our institutions, our governments, our parents, our religions, and our societies. Will we ever grow up and learn to think for ourselves? Sadly, many intelligent people think not and have essentially given up on our species. This book, we think you will agree, offers a practical solution to the human dilemma, a viable way out of the convoluted and unhappy mess we have created. It's a question of consciousness, of the evolution of consciousness, and that can only be accomplished by changing some of our ideas. The only way out is up. Read on, have faith in your own intuition, and welcome to the trust frequency. This is an exciting journey. It is nothing less than the high road to happiness individually and to a transformed society collectively. Page 17, 17.